Welcome to Blender Bitstream. Today I'm looking at how to effectively bake hard surface models. I'll be using this high poly water pump prop and baking the details down to this retopologized low poly mesh. First I'll need to UV unwrap the retopologized low poly mesh, so I'll go into edit mode and select all the edges I want to become UV island edges. When the edges are selected, I'll right click and choose Mark Seam. Now I have the seams marked, I'll select all faces and then in the UV menu I'll choose Unwrap Angle Base to unwrap the UV islands. In the UV editing workspace, I'm going to use a free add-on called Magic UV to pack the UVs with a margin of 0.01. This add-on is great for packing UVs and is available on the official Blender extensions page. The add-on link is in the description. Back in the modeling workspace in edit mode, I'll select all faces and clear the seams now that I have the UVs. Next I'll add shade smooth to the object, then I'll add a weighted normals modifier and set the weight to 100. I'll also check face influence. Now I'll apply the weighted normals and duplicate the mesh. This is going to be the cage mesh, so I'm going to give it a bright green material which I use as a visual guide to make sure the cage fully envelops the high poly mesh. After this I'll add a displace modifier. First I'll set both strength and mid-level to 0, then I'll increase strength until I can no longer see the high poly mesh. For this object a good value is 0.0035. If you want extra control over this process you can use weight painting to reduce the displacement around finer details with lower weight values. Next I'll apply the displacement and set the cage to be hidden in the viewport and in renders, since it's only used for bake data. Now in the shader workspace, I'll add a new material with the retopologized mesh selected and name it. Then I'll add an image texture. This is the image I'll bake the normal map to, so I'll make sure it's set to non-color. I have all the high poly objects in their own collection, so I can select all the objects that need to have their data baked down at once by right-clicking the collection and then choosing Select Objects. Then I'll hold Shift to select the low poly mesh last, so it becomes the active object. Now in the Render Properties Bake menu, I'll set the bake type to normal, check selected to active and cage, then I'll select the cage. For this bake, a max distance of 0.01 works well. Now making sure I have the image texture highlighted and the bake object selected, I can click Bake to bake the normal map. With the normal map baked, I'll pack the image and connect it to a normal map node. Then I can start preparing the second image texture, which I'll use for baking the base color. Again, I'll select all of the high poly objects in the collection, and lastly the low poly object. Then I can start setting up the diffuse bake settings. First I'll uncheck direct and indirect contributions and leave selected to active enabled. But for diffuse bakes or roughness or AO, basically anything that doesn't need vector data, you don't need to use the cage. Just set the extrusion to 0.003 or whatever you used for the cage extrusion. After connecting up the base color, I went ahead and baked the roughness map too. In this render I have the high poly object and its low poly counterpart side by side. The difference is subtle, but the low poly version is far more efficient to render in VFX and in real time. Hopefully this helps you optimize your bake process and speed up your workflow. If you'd like to support the channel, leave a like and subscribe for more Blender Bitstream. Thanks.